Most hotel projects don't realize they make the wrong decision until problems show up on site. And when that happens, the conclusion is almost always the same. We chose the wrong vendor. Then it quickly turned into a budget question. Maybe we went too low. Maybe we should have paid more. But that's not where the risk actually comes from. From what I have seen working across hotel projects in Asia over the past 15 years, execution risk is not created by budget. It starts much earlier, not on the site. It starts the moment we decide who to work with. Once that decision is made, the direction of the project is already set, even if everything still looks fully under control. I'm Helen Tsui. In this video, I will show you 3 gaps in tender evaluation that makes vendors look comparable on paper, but behave very differently during execution. And more importantly, I will give you 3 simple checks you can use immediately to spot these risks early. So instead of just comparing submissions, you will start seeing where project decisions are actually carrying risk before they get locked in during tender. If you look at most hotel tenders, the process looks structured and controlled. Vendors are compared based on price, lead time, compliance, and samples, all organized into comparison tables, scoring system, and decision summaries. On paper, it looks clear. The decision looks reasonable. That's exactly why it passes. But what I have repeatedly seen is this. Projects that follow this process probably still run into execution problems later. So the real question is not, did we evaluate it properly? The real question is, what exactly did we evaluate? And what did we leave out during tender? The core issue is what I call evaluation illusion. During tender, we take something complex, like how a vendor actually performs, and reduce it into few things we can compare: price, lead time, samples, and basic compliance. Everything gets compressed into these factors. And that's where this illusion starts. In reality, execution depends on things that don't show up here. How consistent product is, how strictly quality is controlled, how subcontractors are managed, and how problems are handled under pressure. For example, 2 joinery vendors can both submit a perfect mock-up panel. The finish is aligned, the vendor looks clean, and edges are sharp. On the comparison table, they look identical. So during tender evaluation, both passed. Because the comparison only look at sample, not the consistency behind it. But once production starts, one vendor controls their process tightly, while the other introduces variation. On drawings, both are approved. On site, they behave completely differently. Panels drift, alignment breaks. That difference were never evaluated during tender. So instead of asking whether a sample looks correct, the better question is, can this be repeated consistently across real production? This is not because teams are careless. It is how the system works. First, decisions need to be justified. So teams rely on what can be compared: numbers, submissions, visible outputs. Second, there is limited time. Tender periods are short. You don't see how vendors behave under pressure. You only see what they present. So during tender evaluation, what gets prioritized is what is easy to compare, not what is actually difficult to verify. Third, the system prioritizes clarity. Procurement needs decisions that are clean, documented, and defensible. So what looks complete in tender documents gets approved, even it hasn't been tested in reality. So what actually gets missed during evaluation? First, sample versus real production. Two vendors submit identical samples. Everything looks correct. So during tender, they are treated as equivalent because evaluation is based on what is submitted, not how it performs at scale. But once production starts, one delivers consistency, the other introduces variation. On site, this shows up clearly. Shadow lines shift, joints don't align, and doors don't sit flush. Same sample, completely different outcome. Second, QA system versus QA enforcement. Both vendors show certificates and QA flowcharts. So during tender evaluation, everything looks controlled. But one checks quality at every stage, the other checks only at the end. So errors are either caught early or discovered too late. On site, this becomes rework, delay, and disruption. The difference were never visible during tender because enforcement is not part of the evaluation. Third, lead time promise versus delivery control. During tender, both timelines look equally reliable, but one vendor controls their supply chain, the other depends on multiple external parties. When something shifts, materials, logistic, coordination, one absorbs it, the other pushes delay forward. On site, sequencing breaks. Coordination becomes reactive. Same promise, completely different delivery behavior. And across all three cases, one patterns keep repeating. Different risks are made to look equivalent during tender evaluation. That's where most of the risk is already sitting, just not visible yet. This is why projects follow the same pattern. At tender stage, everything looks qualified. Everything passed, the decision looks reasonable. But during execution, performance spreads apart. And then the narrative shifts. Maybe the vendor is not good. Maybe the budget was too low. But by this point, the outcome was already set. Not on site, not during installation. But at the moment, we believe we had enough information to choose during the tender evaluation. So the issue is not the vendor is wrong, and it's not that the budget is too low. The issue is this tender evaluation made different vendor looks the same when they're not. In hotel tenders, we don't choose the best performing vendor. We choose the one who looks most comparable on paper. And once you see this, the shift becomes practical. You stop focusing only on comparison and start asking what hasn't been tested. Can this be repeated consistently? Where is this most likely to fail? What does the vendor actually control? If you remember one thing, it's this. What you don't evaluate during tender will show up later on site under pressure. So the next time a project runs into problems, don't start with which vendor failed. Start with what did we assume was the same during tender, but was never actually tested. Because that's where the problem usually is. Not visible, not obvious, but already built into the project. That's where projects are won or lost. I look at where evaluation seems complete, but real capacity haven't been tested, especially when design intent and execution start drifting before it shows on site. If you are in the middle of a project and want a second view on where this might be happening, you can reach out. Next week, we go one level deeper. Vendors don't fail projects. Projects fail at vendor selection. Because capability is judged on paper, not against what is required to deliver. And that's where execution starts breaking, long before it shows on site. I'm Helen Tsui. I translate hotel design into real-world execution.